Hello, BookTube. Well, it's spring, and that's a time when young men's hearts lightly turn to thoughts of book hauling. It's a beautiful, beautiful day here in Boston. Blue skies, sunny, warm. The air is lightly tinged with the smell of things growing and budding. The spring is definitely creeping up from down below. Here in my neck of the woods, even in the lowest and shadiest passages of the forest, the stubborn little islands of snowy slush are gone, and little flowers are starting to burst up from the earth. I think sorry, I'm a little bit under the weather. Sorry, I'm not going to tell all of you not to send concerned emails. I'm not going to do that because the concerned emails really put a smile on my face. But nevertheless, I gotta repeat what I often do repeat in situations like this, which is that making videos actually makes me feel good, not physically, but in every other way, and that's important. But anyway, um, I have a feeling that the weather is going to dip back down to normal. I mean, today it was in the mid 60s Fahrenheit. I think tomorrow is going to be almost 70 Fahrenheit. And that's nice, very, very nice, but it's not typical. It should be in the 40s or 50s. And I think that is coming. I think this little window is going to close, but it's wonderful in the meantime. And I had to go out first thing in the morning, the first train ride pulling out of the station, uh, to go to a bunch of appointments. And when I was done, all the shops were opening, including the Brattle bookshop uh, in downtown Boston, a great used bookstore that's always turning over its stock, and that also has a sale lot outside with $1, $3, and $5 books. So it really isn't hard to get to reach your carrying capacity. Like I mentioned in an earlier video, that is the thing that will determine when your trip to the Brattle is done. What will determine it is not when you reach the end of your money. It's when you reach as many books as you can carry, because I guarantee you will reach how many books you can carry before you reach the end of your money. That's how many books you can get for how little money at the Brattle. And the sale lot outside, the $1, $3, and $5 books are not garbage. They are the yardstick is otherwise than that. It's not condition. It's a whole wide kaleidoscope of things that the people at the buying table inside just decide on based on years and years and years of experience. They can tell right away what they want for the shop versus what's going to go outside. And the result is that you can have a fantastic time buying books out in the sale lot. So I did. I got a bunch of books, and I want to show them to you. I am feeling like crap. I was feeling a lot worse this morning. So my carrying capacity was a lot less than normal. So there aren't many books. And the first three are rebuys. The first three are things that I've had before. I knew already that I wanted them. I know I want them in my collection. And the first one I don't even want in this format. It's a mass market paperback from Vintage. And I don't want this. I know this is going to fall apart because I've had two or three other copies. I've had two or three other copies of this, and they fall apart. I use it so much they fall apart. What I really need is a hardcover of this volume, and I've never seen one. And this is the selected essays of Robert Penn Warren, the author of the great American novel, All the King's Men. And this is a collection of his literary essays, his book prefaces, the things that he was tapped by some publisher to do. We're coming out with a new edition, a new biography of Faulkner, or a new interpretation of Dos Passos. We're willing to offer you $1,000 to write an introduction to that, and that's what this is. And he's terrific. He's fantastic at this. He's a really good novelist. He's not as well known. He's known mainly for the one book, the one great novel that he wrote. One of the two or three great political novels in American history. But he wrote a lot of other novels that are really good, and these essays are terrific as well. So I got this. It was $1, so I wasn't had a lot of money. And I got it even though I know that this is not going to survive because I don't have a copy. The last copy that I got did not survive. I read it until it fell apart, so I'll read this one until it falls apart and then hope for better. I'll hope to find it again. This next one is something I have multiple copies of. When I see it, this is in one of those Mylar library jackets. when I see a copy that's in in fine condition with protective covering on it and everything, I get it. Even though I already have, this is not a case where I got rid of my previous copy. I have multiple copies of this book. I just I get it anyway. If it's $1, I get it anyway. And I've praised it on this channel before. It's by Wyman Richardson, and it's The House on Nosset Marsh, with illustrations by Henry Bugby Kane. And these are little vignettes that Richardson wrote for periodical publication 100 years ago. When were these? When were these done? 1940s, so almost 100 years ago. And they're all about the old farmhouse. There was a place that he called the farmhouse that was on Cape Cod, which is, those of you who maybe aren't familiar with your American geography, Cape Cod, Massachusetts, is a rectangle. All three of its borders are a perfect rectangle extending west. But the eastern side of Massachusetts is a fishhook extending out into the Atlantic Ocean. And that fishhook is Cape Cod. And you have the side along the bay on the inside, and then the side along the Great Beach on the outside. And he had a house. The old house was right at the angle, right at the elbow of that fishhook, and used to write these beautiful, bucolic essays about what it was like to leave the hurly-burly of the city and go to the old farmhouse for the weekend or for the summer or whatever, and shift gears is how we would call it now. Shift from city to country living, because at the time in the 1930s, when these observations were taking place, the Cape really was a rural getaway. You wouldn't think of it that way now, not so much now, but then it was really a rural getaway. It was a place where virtually none of the houses were winterized in any way. You lived and died by the big fat stove in the living room. And the living room was ordinarily adjacent to the kitchen and all the bedrooms. It was a very different kind of Cape Cod, and this book captures it perfectly. And the illustrations are amazing. Let me get you one of them. Some of these essays were much more popular than others. Probably the most popular one, of course, an illustration is not going to present itself. There we go. Probably the most popular essay here, the one that's been reprinted the most times, independent of the rest of the book, is The Do Nothing Day, where Richardson describes a phenomenon that often does occur. It still occurs when you go to the Cape, where you will have all sorts of elaborate plans, and then you will realize that you just don't want to do anything. You just don't want to do anything that day. Just listen to the surf and the birds and maybe read. They're all wonderful. I've read from this book many times on this channel. I think it's fantastic. And this is, it's a perfect hardcover with a plastic dust jacket. So I will just look around for my other volumes. I don't think I'll get rid of it. I don't think I have the heart to get rid of The House on Nosset Marsh. It's a classic. And then the last book that I rebought is another classic of a sadder kind. This is a thing that I've had it in hardcover and paperback many, many times. I always get rid of it. The minute I mention it on this channel, somebody wants it, and I send it away. So I'm hoping that I don't do that this time. I'm hoping that I keep this. And this is William Manchester's great book, The Death of the President, all about the death of John F. Kennedy. And it's written in Manchester's usual high style. He had a very particular way of writing that can be very enjoyable, but it's very mannered, so it's easy to mock. And it's all about the events leading up to Dallas. It's all about the events leading up to that date. And what actually happened and what happened in the aftermath. And it's in granular detail with fantastic character portraits. It really is, I think, the most remarkable book to come out of the Kennedy administration. And there's no small supply of those books. And I had hardcover. This was in rotten shape when I found it at the Brattle, so I reinforced it. But I've had hardcovers of this. I have had trade paperbacks of this. I think I even had a mass market paperback at one point or other. I get rid of them all, but I'm hoping not to keep doing that. I'm hoping that I'm just going to hold on to this volume forever. And then the last three books are not rebuys. And the first one is another big biography. This is Ronald Clark's biography of Einstein. which is, this is from much earlier than Walter Isaacson's biography of Einstein. This is from the 1980s, 1970s, 1971. This came out in 1971. And there is our subject when he was right at the height of his fame. And there is our author when he was at the height of his strength. He was a Mussolini type figure, and he was a very imposing, impressive guy. Ronald Clark was a really imposing, impressive guy who got dealt a rotten hand later in his life. It's a cautionary tale to everybody who's imposing now, because he suffered from a whole bunch of things late in life. He suffered from gout on and off, urosepticemia. It sounds like a punchline. It sounds like a thing that people suffered from in the 18th century and that doesn't exist in the world anymore, but it very much does. It very much does exist in the world. I suffered from gout for a few years, and there's just no way to describe the pain. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad pain. And when we're talking about pretty bad pain, Ronald Clark had, you could even arguably say, died of shingles. Shingles can't kill you, but it put him in such a state of daily and nightly stress and strain that it brought on the stroke that did kill him. He had a horrible case of shingles, which is a sort of a dormant virus reactivating, and it causes deep pain in your muscles. People who get shingles always report that before anything else happens, they just assume they've pulled a muscle, because that's sort of what it feels like. It feels like a really bad version of that. But that's only the first part. Then you break out in a virulent rash, a very sensitive, very painful rash that usually only forms on one side of your body. So it'll form all the way along one side of your abdomen, or it'll form along one side of your face, or one side of the top of your head, but not the other side. Sometimes both. And in Clark's case, I think it was both. But one way or another, it reduced him to a shell of his former self. But before then, he was unbelievably prolific as a writer. Just one of those writers who just loves it so much and has so much to say that he was writing all the time. It kills me this is my only book by him. I have many times in my life had he did a really good 1-volume biography of Benjamin Franklin. Pretty sure I don't have that book, but I have had it many times in my life, and it's really, really good. I should have it. I'm hoping that the Brattle provides. I'm hoping that it shows up. But this is the story of Einstein, and Einstein is an amazing figure. This is the only biography of him that I have, but it's an amazing figure. Especially the first half of his story. I admit I love that more. The idea of a patent clerk spending his spare time moving aside the patent forms in order to write out the first thoughts and the finished equations that would reshape reality is just amazing to me. The fact that the foremost scientists of the day could start to ask themselves, okay, well, we have our third paper from this Albert Einstein person, and they're weird, and this third one looks really, really good, but we've never heard of him, and we've checked. He doesn't hold a chair at any university we can find. Finally, the fourth paper, even the most dyed-in-the-wool egomaniacs were saying, this is genius. This is unbelievable, unplumbable, Newton-level genius. Who is this guy? Where is he? Eventually finding him in a patent office. Unbelievable. And also to think, at the halfway point of Einstein's story, the second half of the story I've never found quite so interesting. The half that is on the posters on every undergraduate hall in every university in America of the typical Einstein. Not this Einstein. This is the Zionist Einstein. This is the pacifist, agitator Einstein. This is an alluring, dynamic Einstein. I'm talking about the hangdog figure with the big mane of white hair. The Einstein who's on those posters, I don't find quite as interesting as the Einstein who kept writing these papers. Just kept asking elemental questions. Just, how do you know that? Well, okay, you're saying this, that, and the other, and you're now trying to figure out the variables of some element in connection with time, but how do you know what time is? What is time? What is space? What are these things? Aside from you just telling me what they are, what are they? Why do they behave the way they do? And do they always behave the way they do? I think that story is just amazing. Of course, that for the first half of that story culminates in a near miss for the whole world. What if the Nazis had killed him? What if he hadn't escaped from Germany? It's just, you think about these things. You think about the mind-boggling amounts of damage that the Nazis did on every level of society and every aspect of the world, and then you think how much worse it could have been. How much worse could it have been? What if they had killed Sigmund Freud? What if they'd killed Kafka? What if they'd killed Einstein? It's fascinating to me, and I haven't read a biography of Einstein since I read Isaacson's book. I read this Ronald Clark book when it came out, but I haven't read it since then. And I remember that Clark is a very good writer, a very enjoyable writer, so it'll go in the biography collection, but I'll read it first. And this next one is a figure who has shown up here before, but not this book. This is the great critic Alfred Kazan, one of the great princes of the realm of my own profession of literary criticism, literary writing, that sort of thing. And this is another one of his books. I showed you On Native Grounds, his incredible debut about American literature. And this is his book called Contemporaries, which is just a collection of exactly the kind of thing that I do, only done on an incomprehensibly greater level. This is book reviews, book appreciations, essays, that sort of thing. Somebody writing a commentary, or the New Republic or the New Statesman says, we've got, there's some sort of anniversary coming up. Stefan Zweig has an anniversary coming up, or there's a new book of Kafka's letters. Could you maybe whip up 800 words, 1,000 words on that person? Or, there's a new collection of essays about F. Scott Fitzgerald. I need a literary guy who can do that, and who is well known enough so that their name will sell. And he was that guy. He was often that guy. This book is mainly about 20th century literature. It's classic Alfred Kazan that he starts off a book called Contemporaries with a blast of essays about people who were long dead before he was born, but most of it is about writers from his own time. And those people interest me, and those reviews interest me because he won't change them. These pieces are in here the way they are. So, he'll be talking about this young kid Updike, and he'll just leave it in there, and that makes them all the more interesting. So I will reinforce this and read the daylights out of it. I'll read a whole bunch of stuff, and then there's this last one, which I admit, for $1, I bought it as much for its aesthetic appeal as anything else. In fact, the aesthetic appeal was arguing strongly in its favor, and there was something arguing against it. Some of you are going to know what that something is right away when I show you the book. The book is edited by Jane Urquhart, and it is the Penguin Book of Canadian Short Stories. And just look how beautiful this thing is. That is just gorgeous. It's just a beautiful thing. And these letters are raised. These letters, her name and the title are embossed. And so it almost counts as a BookTube cover by, except that I love anthologies like this anyway. The big Penguin Book of Italian short stories or Japanese short stories. I have a few anthologies of Irish short stories. I love big anthologies like this anyway. I think their attempt to locate a national note in such a wide variety of work I think it's doomed, but I also think it's charming. And they invariably introduce me to writers that I want to follow up on. And that I'm confident that this thing will do that. The only negative that jumps right to mind is that my bête noire, my other bête noire, in addition to Brian at Bookish, is Alice Munro. I think is one of the worst writers working in the last century. One of the most boring writers working in the last century. Aunts at kitchen tables working out train schedules. That is Alice Munro's entire oeuvre. Aunts at kitchen tables working out train schedules. That's all it is. That's all she ever writes about. And her short stories are 40 pages long of that. So if there's Canadian short stories, she's going to be in here. She is. She's Banquo's ghost. She can't get away from her. The minute you mention the word Canadian, she pops up out of the woodwork. It comes out from behind the arras. But there'll be a lot of other people in here that I will really like. And I don't think I read this volume. I don't think I've ever even seen it before today. When did this come out? Was this before my return to reviewing? Is that why? 2007. Okay, so right at the beginning, I got back into reviewing in 2006, 2007. I might have missed this. I certainly didn't write about it. So I'm very happy to have it. I have a whole shelf for story anthologies. It'll just go on that shelf. Once I've dipped into it, I'll do quite a bit of reading in here. And for fairness' sake, in the spirit of BookTube, I will read the Alice Munro short story that is guaranteed to be in here. I'll be amazed if there's only one. Part 1 is View from Castle Rock, and the very first story is The View from Castle Rock by Alice Munro. Part 2 is All This Happened. Does it have an Alice Munro story? No, it does not. Part 3 is Lunch Conversation. Well, that's all Alice Munro ever writes about, so she's got to be in there. Where is she? Oh no, she's not in there. Fantastic. Then part 4 is Paper Shadows. Boy, I don't know a lot of these names. That's great. That is fantastic. She's not in that either. And then part 5 is My Grandfather's House. Charles Ritchie, Charles Roberts, Sinclair Ross, Margaret Lawrence, Alice Munro. Okay, she's only in here twice. I can deal with that. I can handle that. So that's thing number 1, a short story anthology. Always fun to have anyway, because you dip into them. Then we have Contemporaries, a collection of literary reviews and pieces. Also, endless amounts of fun to dip into. Then we have Ronald Clark's big biography of Einstein. One of his earlier books, I think, but I'm looking forward to reacquainting myself with it. Then William Manchester's book, Death of a President, that met with so much resistance from the Kennedy family, i.e. Jackie Kennedy. But mainly because it shows everybody as three-dimensional, flawed humans, including St. Jack. And that is great. That's one of the reasons why it's such a great read. Then The House on Nosset Marsh, one of the greatest books ever written about Cape Cod. I would say the greatest, but I know there are other contenders. And finally, the selected essays of Robert Penn Warren that are a little more highfalutin than the Alfred Kazan, but quite as good. So, there's the possibility of quite a few of these things coming into this room as keepers, which is great. But a lot of them are dipping books. A lot of them are invite dipping. So I'll spend a lot of time with them this week. And there you go. That is a Brattle book haul. Those of you who have been watching your BookTube will know that whatever else the other members of the OGBG may be up to, Mark Richardson and I simply do not pass up an opportunity to book haul on a beautiful day in early spring, if we can help it. He did a book haul just today, a fantastic book haul. He found a Reader's Digest hardcover of The Robe. I would have thumb wrestled him for it if we'd been at the same shop at the same time and seen it. I'll leave a link to his book haul down below. He did it, and I was watching the book haul and I was loving it, but the whole time I was thinking, how much fun would it be if we were doing these together? If we were going out on the road together? Imagine that. Imagine a 1 hour book haul where the two of us tell you about our Brattle haul or about our thrift shop haul up in Vermont or whatever. But I'll definitely take this as an approximation. So he and I are continuing to conduct merciless warfare on your TBRs. But anyway, I don't know when I'll be back to the Brattle or anywhere else this week. We'll see if it happens. But I'm going to wrap this up for now. So I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.